Hello, everybody. Welcome to Psychedelic Seminars. My name is Mike Margulies. And if you are here with us live and you're here in the chat, tell us what space coordinates you are currently tuning in from. We're here today. I'm here with a few awesome friends. We're going to recap and you're going to participate too. We're going to talk about Burning Man 2021, the burn that never happened. It's the decentralized burn, some call it the Renegade burn, but that's a controversial term, which we'll get into. And we're going to have here what's called a fishbowl conversation. We're going to do something, I haven't done this before, but I'm going to try it out here. I'm going to throw a link in the chat to what the fishbowl conversation is. And what we're going to do is, myself and Adam and Manera and Larissa, who are here with me, and I'll have them share a bit about themselves in a moment. We're the seed participants for this fishbowl. But we're going to also invite all of you who are we're going to blur the lines between speakers and audience here because this is burner culture after all. We're all participating. It's immediacy. So you're all invited to participate. If you have a thought, a perspective to share, a story to share, you want to talk about something related to Burning Man or other things that come up to that might be emergent here, you're invited to request to come up here. How are we going to do that? So we have in Crowdcast, we've got an Ask a Question feature, which is usually for questions, but we're going to use it a little differently today. Type into the Ask a Question feature on the bottom of the screen the topic that you want to talk about. And we're going to use that because then you can up and down, you can upvote the ones you like. So the people who are most upvoted that people want to hear from, we're going to invite you onto the screen to share as well. Now, before I have my fellow seed participants inside of this fishbowl share, we're gonna warm it up a little bit here by showing a little bit of what Burning Man was actually like this year. I'm sure some of you in the audience were there, some of you might not have been. So we have some videos. So we'd love to share with you a little bit of videos as people are coming in and settling into their seats. So the first video up here, I'm going to share this. Give me one moment to get that up. And here we go. Yeah, we're gonna mystery science theater this too while we're at it. Why not? So folks, feel free to give commentary if you'd like. Adam, Manera, Larissa. There are the folks. You can see they were gathering on the playa on this alien planet, populating it with sofas.
Yes, it was great weather, folks.
Good times were had by all. We're gonna show some other videos too. Some other clips here. Let's see. We got some other good ones. Here's a good one. This was the drone show. So these are drones flying in formation in the shape of a mushroom, which was pretty epically spectacular. And for those who weren't there, where that ended up actually being a drone show. There were restrictions this year of the burn itself, of what you could burn. We'll talk about the restrictions, what we could and couldn't do. But the drone show, because there couldn't be an official man burn, there wasn't a man in the center this year. So there ended up being a drone version. And I found a video of that too, that I'm going to throw up here. And this is just, we're going to get into the conversation in a moment, but this is just to give you kind of a sense of what was going on here. So there's a little video, I believe right here on this page. There we are. This is the man burn at the Renegade. This is all drones, and I did not expect this at all. I remember this was like gasp of awe when this happened, but this is what happened. All with drones. And the arms went up. Classic. And then it crashed down. Yeah, that was something. That was something. So now that we're in the spirit, love to let you all introduce yourselves, actually, but not bios. How about each of you share how you came into Burning Man? What's your Burning Man origin stories? And whoever wants to pop in first, or I'll choose someone if you don't step up. Adam, you're the one.
Oh, I don't want to go first. Okay. All right. I'll just say I was dragged there by one of my best friends, and it just literally dragged me there. Bought the ticket and was like, "You're joining our camp." It was called Struggle Tent, and it was like 25 people, and we struggled all week to live in tents, and there were no RVs in 2006.
Nice. Larissa, how did you get into burner culture?
Well, I'm obviously from Switzerland, so I heard a lot about Burning Man before I could really attend, because traveling and everything was a lot of planning and whatever. But I learned about it early on. And we had a conference, the Knights Conference, which is actually happening again at the end of November in Berlin this year. And there we invited Stephen Raspa, who's organizing the regional burns, different ones that are like in different countries and regions. And he gave a presentation about Burning Man and the 10 principles. And I've already learned about the 10 principles before, and really realized again that all my life and even my professional work is really organized around these principles. Like radical inclusion is so important for me. Gifting, not just on birthdays, but just being there and showing up for people and expressing yourself exactly the way you are. And the only advice he gave me then, like, once you go to Burning Man, you should just go and get lost. And so that was like what my advice was. And I moved to the Bay Area, to San Francisco in 2018. So that was the first year where I joined UCSF, and I finally was sure I'm going. So I organized my groups in Switzerland and Europe. Everyone wanted to come, and we kind of made it happen. And at the same time, this was the year where Larry Harvey died. And Steven told me about the memorial. So I went to Castro Theater here in San Francisco and was witnessing a beautiful show with speeches, art performances, and music to really honor Larry Harvey and his life. And I've never met him in person, but we could really all feel the spirit. Even his son spoke there. And the party ended with like music and everything going out to Castro Street. It was really impressive. And I stuck around a little bit longer and met Sean, one of my good friends, who then kind of got engaged with a camp. So there was a Russian camp that didn't have enough visas, and their art project got stuck in the Netherlands. And it was a huge story, and they rebuilt it. But he basically got the task to actually rebuild part of the camp, and he got like 60 spaces. So I brought all my people there, and we kind of organized Global Camp the first year in 2018, and then grew it in 2019 to actually a village with which we called Burning Land, with some camps from Sweden and China involved. So we were really kind of bringing that international spirit to Burning Man, and it was amazing to participate from the first minute.
Nice. And Manera, how's your Burning Man origin story?
So I used to run the educational programming for Tony Hsieh's hackerspace called Sin Shop, and we ended up on the regional Burning Man project when they used to have regional projects called Nuclear Dream. And so my first burn was like 10 days and going in early, and I loved it, and I loved the production aspect. So I came from like the weird hacker side of the burn, or the DIY culture.
Nice. And I guess I'll share my own. That's my Burning Man origin story. You know, once upon a time, before I was a psychedelic activist, I used to work as a chemical engineer for Big Oil, as it turns out. And then I did ayahuasca. So I quit my job, went to Burning Man, followed immediately by a one-way flight to India. I proceeded on another adventure from there. Burning Man being the springboard to a very different life that I'm living today. And in many ways, I think Burning Man prepared me for India, actually. It was an exercise in leaning into chaos. And the idea of just, when you're at Burning Man, just going I remember just like turning my bike a random direction and just going away until something happened. And sure enough, always did. The playa magic always happens. So I learned how to navigate chaos at Burning Man. So this year was a little bit different than prior years, because there wasn't officially there was no Burning Man. Didn't happen. The event was canceled. So, but people showed up to the playa. It was without a central organization. It was a burn that was actually truly decentralized. And there were about, I think the estimates I heard were 15 to 20,000 people that came. Normally it's about 70, I believe. I have my thoughts on this, but I want to hear from you all. Like, what do you think? Did it work? Does decentralized organization work? What's the role of the Burning Man organization or not? What came up for you in the context of experiencing this burn versus, how is this burn different from all other burns?
Well, I like to jump in first on this and say that, it was very different because we couldn't build structures. The Bureau of Land Management prevented that from happening. And that kind of put many theme camps out of pocket. They couldn't come. Plus, you were supposed to be a group of 25 or less if you're camping together without a permit. And just so everyone's clear, like if there's no one who pays to privatize the playa, then the playa is public land that can be camped on every day of the year. And I think we've all been aware of this for some time, but Burning Man gets this exclusive use during the week of the burn, and I don't believe you have access to the rest of the playa. Some people are talking about going, if Burning Man comes back next year, like it normally would, that they would camp outside the fence, things like that. I don't think you can actually do that during that week. I think that the entire playa is shut down for Burning Man, but I could be wrong about that. I'm not an expert on Burning Man's permit. That said, what I have read and what we experienced was just a mass camp out, a city that formed organically, but with some pre-planning, with a very useful app that helped us navigate the place. I was driving a mutant vehicle for much of the week. We didn't have to go to a DMV, but we used all of Burning Man's safety measures on our vehicle, which in the past had been, certified by the DMV. We never got pulled over by any police or anything. People were going slow in crowded areas. You really saw speeding only way out in the deep playa in the open desert. I thought people were on their best behavior overall because there was no fallback. There were no guardrails. There was no bumper car and there was no Zendo, for instance. If those who don't know what that is, the place where people having difficult psychedelic journeys can go, where your friends can drop you off if you're like turning into a total bummer and you're crying all night and you need to talk to a therapist. Really, there's like a camp for that, and that's my camp, Foam Home. The MAPS contingent of our camp runs the Zendos, and then many of us who work for Dr. Bronner's set up a big foam camp, and we don't talk about Dr. Bronner's on Playa, but people know that's who we are, and we didn't do all that this year, and because we didn't think that we could because of the BLM. In hindsight, I think we could have actually had both the Zendo and our foam camp, and just within the guidelines of the BLM, we could have worked within their constraints. But nevertheless, I just want to get this conversation started that so many things that we've taken for granted over the years about Burning Man were proven to be superfluous things. And I just hope we get into some of that. So I'll just stop right there. And other things that Burning Man does are really obvious, like art grants and facilitating art on the playa. There was far less art this year, but overall it was a wonderful experience. And, I feel awkward leading off the conversation about it because I have so much to say about it, but someone cut me off.
Well, so I agree with you because it reminded me of both the concept of safety third and like Mike Rowe and Dirty Jobs. He talks about this a lot, right? Like, is that if there's too much safety, then people just kind of ignore safety in general because those rails are so up there. And so I know, like, when I was pitching folks to go, I was like, this is going to be the most decentralized experiment in the country that happens this year. Like, it's going to be this really fascinating experiment. And as a writer, I was just like, yes, I have to be there. And then we, of course, did the temple. And that was just a whole different gift.
Actually, can you share more about the temple experience?
Oh, yes. So I would say I was kind of more on ground logistics and helping support the team because we were really committed to decentralization as part of our organization as well. So we said yes to a lot of folks coming in and helping with the temple, including, that's why there's so many teams that were part of it. So sorry, there was a question by Brenda. Brenda, if you want to talk.
Yes. I'll address that to everyone in case you missed the beginning of this. This is a fishbowl conversation, and if you're in the audience, you're invited to actually get on video too, not just audio. So if you want to come on the stage, there's an ask a question feature. You don't have to have a question per se, but put in that feature like what you want to talk about, and then people can upvote the ones they like the most, and we will invite onto the stage the people that are most requested to share their perspective. Oh, by the way, Manera, can you move your camera slightly so we can see more of your face?
Yes. But yeah.
A little bit more. We're missing the top of your head.
The temple came together with a bunch of crews so at first, when there was no buildable structures, right? So
and normally it's the Burning Man organizations organizing it, right?
Well, I thought the temple was originally organized by David Best, and that was an organic thing. And then
maybe
it may have become more organized in later years. That I don't know. But I had lost 4 people in 10 days. One of them was Tony Hsieh from Zappos, who was a visionary in Las Vegas. And then the day after, my father died. And then 6 days later, our mutual friend, Sean McCabe, died, who was an immersive theater person in the Bay and also just an all-around mensch. And then my aunt died after that. So I knew that a temple was happening, and our friend group after Sean died was certain that a temple had to happen. And so we had been thinking about it since December, when Sean died, and Jason Dorsett really stepped up and resourced our temple. And then we didn't know what we were going to do. At first, it was just Kelsey and Ambient Architects who was going to build a shade. And if we were going to do nothing else, we were going to rake the temple. And we considered it a large land art project, right? And we would go in that direction. But then at Ephemerile, Matt Schultz kind of came in as our advisor. And he talked about building altars and these DIY altars that anyone can participate in, which then became Rainbow Lightning getting involved, and they wanted to build altars, and they had already started conceiving of art, and they needed a place for it to live. So we said yes. And then the Sachi temple was part of that. So we just started saying yes to everything as far as the temple goes, because we felt like that was what was really important in this moment. Like, we needed a place to grieve, and we needed that place to feel sacred. And Sean was all about Hellish shamanism, which was finding these like ritual sacred moments and even the most mundane weirdo things. So if you've ever been in a Sean ritual, it could literally, we did synchronized swimming, which is just people clapping their hands above their heads, right?
Up and down, and up and down.
Right. And so like we are all pranksters in that crew as well. So we definitely had like a lot of pranky energy coming into the temple, and that allowed us to navigate the chaos that it was.
Yeah. Sean was, of course, a good friend of mine too. I lost 2 friends that week as well. And I actually heard about Sean. I heard about Sean's death when I was doing the tech check for the Psychedelics and Death event I did in December, which is just like the we could talk about, I mean, we can talk about Sean a little bit. I think the temple, a lot of it was, people that knew and loved Sean were involved in that, like yourself.
Shipwreck built that wooden piece that was outside the shade, and that was like his act of love. And a lot of people came and helped him build it. So it was really, really cool.
I also shared a link to your article on Medium about the temple build process. So that is in the chat there. And yeah, I just think that's a really great story, right? Where the whole thing was this, it was decentralized, the temple build breakdown, the whole thing. It was, you're kind of on the fly figuring it out. And we had a conversation on the playa about how, you know, you came into it not even knowing exactly how it was going to work out, but how holding that story, like, yeah, it's going to work out. And you held that.
I definitely, like, it was such an act of faith and grace and like so much love. Like, everyone brought their best self. Right. And so it was really, really a beautiful, like, coming together. And even BLM, like, I must have talked to 20 different officers, and each one of them I walked through, I was like, this is kind of how we think it might happen, but we have no idea how we're going to make that happen. And then we're just like, okay, well, you have a constitutional right to be here and we're supporting that right. And I'm like, awesome. So I felt like it was a great thumbs up, but I did walk them through like our understanding of DG, and right, like, so I gave them enough confidence that we knew what we were doing and we weren't trying to create a moment that would cause a problem for them, because that's not what the temple is about either, right? So we wanted to hold that sacred space, and I think they really felt it.
Yeah.
You know.
And it was cool too. Everyone who wanted to could participate. You know, people were breaking down the temple. It was being manually broken down because you couldn't burn the whole temple. It was burned in all the rules were followed right to the edge. So we're burning in little cauldrons set up, elevated off the playa. But, you know, it was broken down, and anyone who wanted the right could go. I walked over and I just started carrying the pieces, bringing them where they needed to be. And all kinds of people did that. Just saw it. Okay, I can participate. People just joined in the process and were able to actively be part of the temple burn. And I don't know if that's happened.
There were also some like definite panic moments too, like the BLM, as one of the pyramids is on fire, like comes to me and goes, if that pyramid piece falls and hits the playa, that's $1,000 a side, right? You need people pushing the material in. And I just pull people from the audience. And I'm like, hey guys, we need help with this. We need people to take log sticks and hold the fire cauldron. And people just did it, which was amazing. And they're like, wait, but I don't have any first training or ranger training. And I was like, it doesn't matter in this moment. Like, we actually just have to do it, right? Yep. And thank goodness for everyone who said yes. And that was the most beautiful thing about the whole thing, was all those people who said yes.
Yeah, well, in that moment, that just says so much, right? Because we're usually looking for, there's always like, we're looking to someone is the leader, someone's running this thing, someone is in charge here, right? It's like, no, we're doing this. We're all doing this thing. And it's just, I think that's also relevant to the moment of time we're in right now. Like, no. It's not like some leader that's going to save us. Like, we're in this thing. We're doing the thing. We're figuring out the future, all of us together, every decision that we're all making. I would love to, well, I want to make sure if you have more to say on that, I want to let Larissa share something too, but if there's anything else burning to share from that, Manera.
Oh, no, let Larissa go.
Okay, yeah.
As we go along, so.
Yeah. Well, I can actually very well relate to that, because I was also at Ephemeral and I met Shipwreck and Nady, who did like a big part of the temple production this year. We also kind of followed up afterwards here in San Francisco and met, and I heard about the idea. I also knew Sean, and I can also say that since I lived in San Francisco, it's the first time in my life that I actually lost people, including Sean, and 3 people so far. And that has not happened to me earlier in life, or in Switzerland. Like, people also have risky substance use patterns or other issues and whatever, but there was never a case of suicide or other things happening. And here in America, things seem to be different, and some people are challenged more, and that's why we need to do more to actually find ways to support it. And that has been shown dramatically at Burning Man, like the community, how people really came together this year. I must say there were a lot of first-time burners. I don't have like a person, but it could have been 40 or even 50% almost, because I mean, it was a free flow to go. And everyone was well prepared and made their home duties, or they were not, and they learned the lessons. I was driving in on Tuesday night with my crew, and I posted a story on Instagram. And this weekend, I was out in San Francisco, and a friend of mine told me, "Do you know that you inspired me to go to Burning Man? When I saw your story that you're driving there, we decided to go." So many people really decided to go last minute, or maybe just show up for the weekend. And there were also a lot of local people who could otherwise not afford to actually join, like people from Gerlach, Reno, or the other rural areas around. And they had fantastic experiences of community. So this was really about community, and it was about music. And the art was in certain ways missing, like the big art structures, clearly, but even there, people found creative ways to actually put some shade structure around it and still
Right. You couldn't have art, you had to only have shade structures. So people made art out of shade structures. It was the most brilliant thing I'd ever seen. I
There was
just
so
love
much
it.
improvisation going on all across the city.
Yeah.
And
So
all across, the clusters outward too.
Yeah. People got really, really creative this year, I would say. And as I said, like there was Plan B who organized on Facebook mainly. There was a small Telegram group. There was this Black Rock Desert camps where people could place themselves until like 2 or 3 days before the week started. And there was at the end 670 when I left, or around 700 camps placed. And many of these camps actually really showed up in the spot where they were supposed to be, thanks to that app, What 3 Words. So each 10 square feet has like its 3 words. Also, wherever you are right now, you can open it and you find your square. It's an amazing thing to organize. And like magically also the Esplanade and the playa was respected. So there were not other people crashing in there or setting up in the middle of the playa. And that was also well done, because Burn Night was chaos. Burn Night was crazy. Like all the people were out there, all the art cars were out there, people driving around. That never happened, right? Usually you even leave your bike somewhere and you walk to the middle and all the art cars are lined up nicely. So it was chaos on Playa, and there was definitely a reason to not camp in the middle. That also to be said for future burn. But overall, the community came together. People were asking about violence too. I personally didn't see any incident of violence. The only time when I was not up for sunrise, there was one person who got violent, who was violent in front of Robotard, but that was taken down by 7 rangers. And there is this picture on Facebook, some may have seen, or I can send it, where you see the man, some rangers holding him down, and behind you see an old man, hands in a prayer. So that's like such a powerful message. It's really about peace and about betterment of the future, because I think it was kind of a different situation than in other years. It was more extreme. People had to be more self-reliant, and people really showed up and cared.
And something that's coming up for me hearing you say that is like, the idea that there's inherently order in chaos and chaos in order. So it was chaotic, it was decentralized, but order emerged from it. Like people figured it out. And similarly, like when we try to instill order, there is chaos. Like let's think about like the drug war. It's about order. Like, oh, we're gonna like stop drugs. But no, it didn't do that. You just made it more chaotic is what happened. So and I think that was an interesting thing to see from this. Like there was an order that emerged out of it. Like people showed up and did the things. I'm going to start also feel free to keep, let's keep circling around. There's things that are coming up. Yeah, go ahead, Adam. I'm going to invite people also.
I want to harp on something Larissa said a little bit, and that is that there was no ticket. And, you weren't asking anyone permission to go there. You were exercising your rights as this is public land to go there. And there were different ways you could have accessed the playa. You could come in from the far south. You could come in from multiple roads and further up. And you can leave in multiple ways. So there was really no traffic. It was not like you had to wait to get onto the road or get to leave. And I really think we have to start to question the value of ticketing. I met Larry Harvey a few times before he died. We do Catharsis on the Mall here in Washington, D.C. It is, on a little bit of a hiatus right now due to COVID, but we did 6 years of it. And
Amazing event.
Free. Yeah, it's a free gathering on the mall. You're not supposed to sleep there, because you're not allowed to really camp on the National Mall, but you can be there 24 hours a day, and you can have cathartic dancing, and you can have sacred fire, and we've done this really in so many different ways already. It was amazing, and it was always free. We'd raise the money for it. I can't see this just be ignored, what just happened. I think the Borg, the Burning Man organization, really has a responsibility now to figure out how to open up the entire playa as a First Amendment zone, and how to bring back some of the things that can only be done with bigger permits, but not necessarily close the entire playa and instead say, actually, we're looking forward to 100,000 people spread out over 100 miles of desert, where it's not even crowded. Even with 100,000 people, will not be crowded, and essentially allowing different areas to grow. Instead of just having one city, you maybe have a main city and a main area, but then you could also have lots of satellite areas. Because I have to say that the intimacy of being in Deep Playa with just 20 of your closest friends, burners I've known for over a decade, and not seeing another soul or building or hearing anything, and just going out 30 miles. You can never do that at Burning Man. You have a fence, you have 5 miles, that's it. 30 miles, you're in a different place, and you have a different view. It's a different experience. That playa is so amazing. Last thing I want to say is, on the way out to, our group, our camp had an event called Foam Zenders, and it was the Zendo and it was the foam benders, if you will. And we met up in Laytonville, and we all got COVID tested, and 300 people gathered, and it was basically just our camp. We weren't going to Burning Man. We were just going to gather. So we did that. And on the way out there, I stopped for one night with my daughter and a couple friends on the playa, and we camped out, and nobody was there yet. And there was dragon skin. And I put out a couple posts. I couldn't help myself. I was like, this place with nobody here is pretty amazing. And I'd never been there all these years with nobody there. It's always been with lots of people there. So I sent that out, and I feel like I also helped send out the bad signal, folks, it's open, you can go here. Just because Burning Man isn't happening, you can still go. And I think there was a lot of us buzzing this and didn't realize that we were promoting something that was decentralized. But anyway, I just want to point that out. Why did all these people go? Who told them to go? It's people wanted to go.
Yeah, I couldn't resist personally. When I knew. Hey. Yeah, well, we got a couple more people. I'll let you guys come chime in a second. I'll just say you bring this up for me. Once I knew this was happening, it was sort of I just had to know I had to know what this was going to be. I had to experience it firsthand. And so, it was just irresistible to me. I was magnetized to this. Last time I was in Burning Man wasn't since 2016. I hadn't been in years, but this year I just felt, got to do it. We have new people inside the fishbowl. Also, one quick note, there was one person who asked an upvoted question, Brenda. I am not able to invite you on the screen. I'm not sure if it's because you don't have a camera or something, but just letting you know, I do want to invite you on, but I'm not able to. But we do have a couple folks, and I want to let you guys share a little bit, and then also want to invite anyone here. We have there's a limited crowdcast of 6 people on the screen. So whenever you feel complete, whoever wants to, feel free. If you want to step down, we can beat someone back in. Let's keep it flowing. But we've got 2 folks. Hey, Halcyon, how's it going? We had an interesting kind of chance meeting in San Diego a few months ago. So, the playa exists outside of the playa too. Maybe Halcyon, you want to chime in?
I would love to. First, I'm loving your guys' feedback and thoughts and reflections. I had an incredible experience out there. I had all sorts of fears, and shame on me for not having faith in our community. It was incredible. The question that I wanted to pose to you guys that I've been thinking a lot about is, how well would we have figured it all out on our own without decades of training as practicing through Black Rock City? And also, how big a role did the online pre-organization play, with Plan B and the Reddit threads and things like that? I mean, it's not like 15,000 people showed up in the desert and we figured it out. I feel like there was this pretty significant planning that we put into it. Yes, decentralized, but I go. Those are my two questions. Like, how much did the online planning play a role, and could we have done this without the school of the org that we've all participated in?
I would say that I was really grateful. Like Top Hat from Temple Guardians came and pretty much made us Temple Guardians and gave us ways to hold sacred space. So like without all of that training, I agree with you. People knew what to do. They knew how to form a perimeter. They knew how to take care of their friends. And they knew how to like, oh, I spotted a dark wad, I'm going to solve that problem. Right? Because we knew that there wasn't an org that was going to solve that, or it wasn't someone else's problem. So thankfully, the org did train us. I'm really, really grateful for that.
Yeah, I would add to that and definitely say there are so many resources out there online. And we had lists for the newcomers and the first timers where we really shared, including videos of you, Halcyon, where you go through the basics. And I think that's the whole culture that evolved and that has really built around the organization. And I mean, the organization was not sleeping. I know about all the big questions that they were discussing before they canceled it. There was a huge, the best medical team hired to really get to a solution that works for everyone. But unfortunately, either way, they would have made one group unhappy, and they realized that. And I think it was the right decision to not do it in that case. I mean, from the perspective that they had and the advice that they had in the back. But everything that came out of it, and again, like going back to the 10 principles, this year was a year where people prepared and where they took it serious. And also looking at substance use and harm reduction. Again, we didn't have a Sendo tent, an official one. So it was really up to each and every one of us. There is a lot of substance use out there to care for each other, to make sure that people drink enough water. And it was not as hot maybe as in other years, but still after midday, if you like partied through and did the sunrise, the sun was really strong. And it was also nice to see from bigger team camps like Robotard on their final closing day, they really handed out a lot of water after around noon because it got hot and people were sweating, and maybe not everyone brought exactly the amount of water that they had. But it was throughout like a positive experience that was only possible with the knowledge and experiences from prior years.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Certainly. I think the training we had from many years helped a lot, no doubt. So we've got Russell here. Russell, did you want to share any thoughts, ask a question, whatever? You are muted. There you are.
Did I get it?
Yeah,
I mean, I met Larissa there this year, and it was this is my 5th burn, and it was amazing. And I was like, I was one of those who just like decided to go. I was thinking about it earlier in the summer. None of my friends were willing to do it, and then like the week of, my friends were like, yeah, we're thinking of going. It was Monday, and I was like, I don't think I can make it. And then Wednesday, I just like packed up and got in my car and went. And I'm really grateful I did, because it was incredible. And I really was super impressed by like how it was done. I guess for me, I mentioned it in the chat. I just wonder, there were a lot of new people there, and it felt like a higher proportion than I'm used to. And there were a couple of instances, like one guy, like just gotten there, middle of the night, his girlfriend ended up in an ambulance and disappeared, and he had no idea what to do. And so I ended up like rolling around with him. Like somebody had one of the maps of like the volunteer camps. I brought him to like an EMT tent. They didn't, they said they would handle it. And I'm hopeful, and I imagine that it did get sorted out. But then the last day, there was a guy who had arrived literally at 3 a.m., like a burn night, didn't know where he had parked, had lost everybody, didn't have water, didn't have food. And I just wonder, like, this year we were able to like take care of them because there was like a critical mass of veterans. But I just wonder, like, next year with like, if COVID's resolved and everybody saw what happened this year, it could be 200,000. If everybody's like, oh, it went great, you know, and then do you have that same critical mass that can carry all these new people who want to jump in? And that's where I wonder how do you approach that? Like how do you account for that huge unknown of like how many people, you know? That's the question.
I'd like to try to take this on. I think it's a great question because, I mean, there were people that were definitely lost. They were coming by our camp, and especially on Sunday morning after burn night, there seemed to be people that were really still struggling to find their way back, and they got totally disoriented. I think we have to warn people that you got to learn how to use a compass, and you need to have that app, the 3-word app. And if that's the app that we'll use in the future, I also think that maybe Burning Man's coming back next year, and I mean there's a lot, and when it does, that's I think the real question for me is like, could Burning Man figure out a hybrid model that essentially addresses some of these things? I mean, Burning Man flirted with the idea of being 100,000 people. It's never gotten over 70, but I met, I mean, so many virgins. Every virgin I met told me, I've been trying to come here for 4 or 5 years, not just like 1 or 2 years. These were people that were really desperate to come and were locked out all these years, and that they finally got the chance to go when there was just no holds barred, just come. And now I'm realizing, well, we could do no holds barred. I mean, there could be different types. We could divide up the playa and have different types of settlements, if you will, for the week. Also, like MOOP. I'm already seeing reports that there is a MOOP problem. Like there are things that were left behind. It wasn't left in a pristine condition like it was found. But then again, the national parks and keeping them clean in public land, in this case your BLM land, is the responsibility of the government. And you can do your best to educate the populace to keep it clean, but it isn't a failure of the event if 0.1% of the attendees ended up being kind of sloppy and didn't really clean up after themselves. I don't think that's a justification for not having it in the future. Lastly, I thought it was going to be a shit show, and it wasn't. And it turns out people who brought RVs were heroes. They were very generous. One of the greatest gifts was letting someone use your toilet. And if you had an actual flushing toilet or indoor toilet. I was camping. We had a tent with a bucket and some tea litter. And I just want to say it wasn't that bad if you weren't there. And I prefer it over porta-johns. Let's just be real. Porta-johns stink 24/7. Miles of them on playa. It's come on. And that's where most of your ticket price goes, folks. It's those toilets. And so what do we have? And so if you want to also like discourage people from going, don't bring the toilets back ever.
Yeah, and to add to that, think about the amount of trucks that are driving around and coming in and out, and just that's something that I noticed too. It's like we didn't have all of those massive, like, I don't know what you call them, but the service trucks up and down, and you know, like all the gas and the fuel that's wasted. So having only 3 or 4 days, you use your RV, you fill it, you leave. You're not there for a week. So it makes sense. And to the last response around like, how can we do this bigger? Like scaling what the experience that we just had, I just don't think would work. I mean, I don't know if we got a final count. I've heard it was 15, 20,000. I don't know if anyone knows what that final count was, but for that size, I think anything bigger than that, we do need infrastructure. You're building a city. When you have 70,000 people, you need medical, you need actual. But I just want to share, like, I don't know if this is the elephant in the room, but one of my greatest joys from the burn this year was the diversity. Like, I've been going to Burning Man for 14 years of my life, and it's a white event. It is. And my experience this year, everywhere I went, I was like, meeting like beautiful African Americans and Native Americans, and like there was no barrier to entry with the ticket cost and having to know a camp and being part of a camp. Like the exclusivity was removed. We get diversity, and that's what we need at Burning Man. That's what we've been asking for so long. I know that was a really hard thing to do, And that just brought me so much joy, to be honest, that we were able to open the experience to so many different groups of people and then bring them in and show them like the love and the connection and what we do as burners out there. And it's not just about burning things and fire, and the big art, of course, is awesome, but then we were redirecting the eye candy of the big art, which I love, and the fire, which of course I love, but to like each other. And there was no FOMO to be at a million things. Like I spent most of my burn like having beautiful heart connections with people. And the art was the people, like going to Reverbia and the live music and the dancing and the fire dancing, which I know they weren't supposed to, but they did. And it was so beautiful. And those are some of the things that I really love. So it's like that diversity piece. I think there's a lot to learn there. Coming back to the burn with like a ticketed event, like how do we like learn from that? I don't know. It's like once you have a $500 ticket and a 10-hour wait to get in, I don't know if I ever want to do that again. After being able to just drive in and drive out, and like it was easy burn. It was loving burn. I don't know. There's just so many things about it that I can just go on and on about how wonderful.
Please do. You're totally on point on everything.
Yeah, all those things. Yeah. I mean, without the negative, I have to agree. Like I was hurting my heart being out there as an old school burner was, there was a lot of moop. Like I spent a lot of time just picking up after people beer cans. I'm like, beer cans, like not like feathers were usually, so that was pretty bad. Other than that, everything
I
was
just want to respond to that last comment. The BLM a few years ago was telling Burning Man they wanted public trash cans. Like they thought they should just put trash cans around the city and just collect the trash. And especially where there's like a high traffic event, and Burning Man resisted that. But if this continues like this, the BLM would actually do that as a mitigating thing, because ultimately they're responsible for the cleanup, or they could close it to public use, or start fining people for littering. I mean, there's a lot of things they could do that they're not doing. But again, I like to push it back on the government, because they have to figure out a way to give us access without, with people, trashing the place. But I think your points are so spot on, and about how it was the FOMO-less burn. And believe me, I know about FOMO. Okay.
Yeah.
And people come all the time and miss the foam, and they've got FOMO for real. And
pun intended.
Yeah, it wasn't as many luxuries as you would normally find at a big Burning Man. Just put it that way.
And we were environmentally friendly. We weren't burning a lot of wooden structures and burning propane in our cars. It was Drone Man. It was like, this is the most even this was more like, felt more green than Green Man, to be honest. Like, I thought that was cool too.
Yeah, and I want to echo some things you were both saying there, right? Around, there wasn't as much big art, but to me, the spirit of Burning Man was so much there. And to me, what's the memorable things I have from any burn? It's those serendipitous encounters. And serendipity was at an all-time high, I would have to say. I got stories for days about that. Like everywhere I went, running into people, and meeting just the right person just in that time. And it was just, and that's the spirit of the burn to me. And that was alive and well, very, very, very much. And I also wondered about the big art, to what extent was that an artificial constraint, right? What we are physically just as capable of building it, but there were regulations preventing the art from being built. People are capable of building art, doing it safely. But there were restrictions. There was some of the stuff that we weren't seeing this year. It's not that it wasn't possible to do in a decentralized way. It was being restrained. People were being ticketed for riding on art cars, which, is it all of a sudden not safe to do that? And it was safe all these prior years, why is it different now?
Riding on art cars?
Yeah. Or the people driving, I think the people driving art cars, if people were riding outside of them while they were driving, were getting ticketed. And that was happening, which hasn't happened before. So that was a thing that was not, about this burn. That was a negative versus prior burns, but why does that have to be like that? There isn't any real reason we need to ticket people for riding on an art car. Is there a risk? Yeah. Okay. But I am in favor of people, there's a responsibility associated with coming to a decentralized event or any kind of anything in the world. So I'm more on the side of let the people do their thing. Let's have people actually think about safety, actually, like actively think about it, put that into the culture. Like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. There's risk. What are the risks that can happen? And and we can even do more of that. And that would be great if we empower each other to really think, not to outsource safety to some external person to tell us what we can and cannot do and what is safe and what isn't safe. But like, why don't we train ourselves, train our community, train our culture to really take our own safety of our community in our hands?
I mean, that was the BLM, of course, that would have been ticketing people for riding on the art cars, right?
Yeah, I don't know which.
I mean, that's just the Nevada vehicle
organization.
You're not supposed to ride on a moving motor vehicle, not in a seat with a seat belt. It's a vehicle code rule, which is sort of suspended when you have a private event. And so they were just returning to that. I'm not sure you'll convince them not to do that, other than with the 5-mile-an-hour speed limit, which maybe allows that to happen. A lot of the stuff that happened to Burning Man comes from a history of interaction between the organization and the BLM. In fact, maybe one would argue the organization even existed mainly because there had to be somebody who got a permit and had to do all these rules. And that's been a very tortured history. I think what's interesting about the Renegade Burn, and I was very impressed with how well it came out. I didn't go to it. I watched it remotely. I participated in the virtual burn. I've been to the Burning Man 15 times, going back to the 90s. And I think in looking at that history, it seems that it might be worthwhile for the board of Burning Man Project to look and say all the decisions we made over the course of these past many years, which came because of things like fatalities, which took place at the event, came because of just many things that go wrong. Every label, everything on a warning label that you read is because of somebody did something stupid like eating the gel or eating the little thing inside your bottle of pills. Every warning came from that, and every rule at Burning Man in many cases came from being prompted by that. And this Renegade burn might actually cause a little bit of thinking and reset about, well, is that really what we want? Do we really need to have it? Or did we just get it because of tradition? That's probably the most interesting thing that will come in regular Burning Man, if there is a worthwhile re-examination of that sort of thing. Unfortunately, some of the things that people want, like 100,000 people, are very unlikely to happen. That's a physical limit of the road. You just cannot move that many people down that 2-lane blacktop from back to Highway 80. And that's one of the reasons. Obviously, it's not the size of the Black Rock Playa that makes them constrain the size of the event for that. A bunch of those rules are going to be very hard to change with the BLM. But who knows? But anyway, it began, of course, as a disorganized event. But I actually asked a question separate from what we were just discussing. I called it the elephant in the room because there's been no mention of it. The event was canceled because of the virus. And not only that, but when the event was canceled because of the virus, we actually were mostly beating the virus. But in July, the Delta surge appeared. And there's actually more COVID in California now than there was a year ago, when nobody questioned whether the event would be canceled. The Delta variant spreads with a much higher viral load. Because a lot of people are vaccinated, it's not killing as many people. But we're actually in the middle of a COVID wave that is worse than anything but the bad January wave. And the event went on. Of course, it's mostly outdoors and mostly in a place with reasonable amount of wind. So but there were a lot of people living together in close quarters, living in RVs. There's no doubt that Delta was spread at the event. Unfortunately, there's no doubt that there might be more fatalities because of this event than any Burning Man in the past. And we're not even mentioning that. And people talked about the people they lost this year. I lost people to that disease this year. So I wonder why no one mentions it, I guess.
All right, who wants to go first? I'll go if there's no takers yet.
I'll take it on. I'm pro-vaccine, and I am vaccinated, and I had 2 COVID tests prior to going to Burning Man or going to Plan B. So I thought I was trying to be responsible, and I didn't want to be a super spreader or that basically, or catch it. That's why I got the vaccine. I think the majority of people there were vaccinated. There was some discussion of COVID and vaccines, but I know one thing's for sure. When I got home, I got tested twice before I socialized again, because it was not a safe space people were not wearing masks in close quarters. But there weren't a lot of indoor spaces either. Unlike previous years, there were very few domes. There were very few large, structures where people were getting inside and grouped together, I guess inside of RVs. But that was usually people were socializing the most with people they were camping with in their immediate neighborhood or area, because it was harder to get around. People were staying closer to home more, I think. And so, yeah, I hear you about the situation we're in, but for vaccinated people, I think this was a very minimal risk. And
yeah, well, you may have this is a common misunderstanding about vaccination, which is, well, it does protect you from disease. Its primary purpose is to stop you from being a vector for the disease. And it doesn't do that completely. It does make you have a slightly lower chance of getting a case. And when you get a case, you're much less likely to have a serious or fatal case. But the real purpose of vaccination and the real purpose of all of the lockdowns and mitigations is to stop the disease from spreading, from stopping its ability to be exponential. Monera mentioned an event called Ephemeral that I was at this year, which was a much smaller event, about a couple hundred people at most. There was an outbreak at that event. And it started on one boat. It was a very windy place. Ephemeral takes place, and even windier than the playa. And everyone outdoors except when they were gathering on their boats. And nonetheless, there was an outbreak, including at least 2 known cases of spread outside the boat where it originated. And if there can be an outbreak like that at a much, much tinier event in a windier place, I'm afraid that it can only come to the conclusion that there was spreading. We might not know it because people may not report it. We may not hear about it, but it can only conclude that there was significant spreading at an event of this size.
Yeah. I think it's important. I want to echo something you said there, actually. So there are currently more cases in California, but there have not been a similar spike in deaths. So if you look at the data from 2020, they correlate, right? The cases correlates with deaths. But if you look at now, cases are going up, but deaths are not. That's because of vaccines, of course, right? And I guess I'd like to rewind the clock. Let's go to March 2020. In March 2020, there was conversation about some people were saying, which I did not agree with then, that, hey, this is just the flu. No, it wasn't like the flu for a few reasons, right? Spreading faster, more deadly. There's no immunity in our culture. This isn't something that's just like the flu. I would make the case, though, that today in 2021, we're in a different scenario than we were in a year and a half ago in 2020. Now we actually do have levels of immunity in our communities that we did not have prior through vaccines, through people getting COVID. And we're seeing
about half the population, which is good, but it's still a lot of people not vaccinated.
Yeah. Where I'm getting to with this is, at this point in the US, everyone who wants a vaccine can get access to a vaccine. And there is a virus. I don't think COVID
except for children and immunocompromised people and a variety of others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we have COVID. I don't believe that COVID is ever going to go away. I don't think it's like we're going to eradicate it from reality. It exists. It is a thing that is just, it's going to keep mutating. It's around, right? I think that we're entering a phase of COVID where there is a shift occurring. But from where we were last year, where there's more of a personal responsibility element than there was a year and a half ago, right? And it's a spectrum, of course. It's not to say you forget about your community. You keep in mind the immunocompromised people. You keep in mind people who can't get vaccines. So a lot of complicated factors to bear in mind with all this. It's a very complicated, nuanced thing, right? Because you're balancing this personal freedom versus community responsibility, and how do you navigate all that? That's the meta conversation we've been having the last year and a half. I think I'm not saying I have the answers here, but from my vantage point, from what I've seen, I think that where we are today in the United States, we are moving on that spectrum more towards the personal responsibility side of it, where people who want to do things that carry more risk, I believe there's more of a sense of, okay, I feel like I can make my risk assessment. Now, if I have people that I'm in my bubble that are immunocompromised, right, I might want to behave differently. I probably don't want to go to an event where I might expose them to COVID.
Well, this, by the way, is a debate which I don't want us to go too far on the rabbit hole, because that's a debate for the whole world. To get to the very specifics of this event, though, what you said may be true, but it doesn't apply if you're in the middle of a big wave. And we
So I would like to point out, because I was a resident of Nevada and just moved to Colorado, and I worked for Meow Wolf, which opened during a pandemic. The Raiders are currently having games. Life is Beautiful is about to happen, right? So you're seeing these large gatherings that are happening in Nevada. So why can commerce do it, but revolutionaries can't? And I think that was kind of a question those who decided to partake in this event were asking. And the question I personally asked was, in a time of great transition and chaos, can we hold sacred space in those times? And can we be agent humans who say it is important to be in sacred gatherings, in ritual, holding spirituality, even in the face of fear? And if the Raiders can do it, why can't we?
Yeah. I also, I want to echo something there. I do believe in the importance of gathering physically. Like, this is great. We're here on Crowdcast, and now we have people. We're all over the country and world. We can tune in. We can have a conversation. And I think this isn't going away either. Like, there is something we've discovered in COVID, this this new way of engaging online. I also think that there is something that cannot be, you cannot replace that human gathering, face to face, hugging another human being. There is a certain special thing that happens when you're physically present with another human or with a group of people. Gatherings, like I'm a gatherer, I'm a community builder, I'm an event organizer, right? Like, I just believe in the power of gathering. And I mean, I think it's also important to name here, and actually, Larissa, maybe you can pop in a little bit about this. During the isolation that has happened in the last year and a half, there are other deaths that have happened, right? There's overdose deaths that have skyrocketed, and some of our friends that died, like, how much was that connected to the isolation element, right? And you can't see depression and isolation in a microscope. That doesn't mean it's not real.
I'm sorry if you think anyone is disputing the value of gathering, of sacred space, one of these things. That's not the case. I'm talking about during a high point in a surge, right? You don't have your gathering at that specific time.
Okay.
Well, I also want to pop in and just say, as Mike mentioned, there were so many correlates that led to a lot of secondary harms related to the pandemic or isolation. So I think it was very, very important for many people to really be out there. And this is not like the only festival that has happened. We have seen that, for example, in Miami, with warmer temperatures, everything was open. Of course, they have also a rise in cases. I don't want to discuss states, but also in California or San Francisco, the nightclubs are open. People can gather indoors. And at the same time, we didn't see any spike. And to just add the numbers to the overdose deaths, what we've seen in San Francisco is that in 2020, we lost 250 people to COVID, and everyone could have gotten COVID and died technically if their body was not healthy. And then we saw 713 people dying from a drug-related overdose, and that's 3 times as many people. And it's just such a small group of the whole city who's really affected. And we've seen these continued overdose cases. I just ran into an overdose myself again on Friday, and I talked to the firemen who were taking care. And at least in San Francisco, people are well informed. They also know about harm reduction. And there is, for example, right now, the Crisis Act in the state legislature that asks for alternative opportunities to policing, which is also worth mentioning. But I understand that people were afraid, but just Jenny mentioned it very nicely in the chat. She got tested pre and tested after. All of the people in my group tested pre and tested after, even twice. And as Jenny says, in the end, it was definitely not a safe event, but individuals could be safe if they choose to be. So there was nothing that like led people to be part of big groups or gatherings. There was enough to do around. You didn't have to be in the middle of a
and Brad,
I'm not trying to. I feel we're diverting towards an issue, which of course we've all been talking about for the last year and a half, and I want to focus on how it relates to our community specifically. And so, you know, the question of is lockdowns worse than deaths from overdoses and so on steps a bit outside that. So let's actually move back from it. And I only wanted to bring up this point about the very specifics about when we had the event and the reason the event itself was canceled being related to that, and not the bigger question of whether lockdowns are good or bad or whether, you know, events should be canceled. But very specifically, this event took place at the same time the normal event would have taken place in the Labor Day weekend, and that turned out to be in the middle of a big surge. And while as a disorganized event, it actually should have had the flexibility to say, hey, you know what, we're doing it 2 weeks later.
Well, nobody was organizing it. Let's not go too far. We've gone a lot on this question, so let's keep it flowing.
I want to pull back from getting out to the bigger issue and focus on.
Well, but I gotta say that because there was no fence, there was no artificial barriers of where you could go. People were really spread out, and there were clusters that were far out. And it was, you want to talk about social distancing on the playa? It was possible. I mean, Burning Man is too crowded as it is. I drive mutant vehicles at Burning Man, and this was easier to drive a mutant vehicle at, and I had no marked roads. I had to navigate between clusters of settlements, if you will. But it was like
my art truck
driving
can't
through
go
veins.
more than 5 miles an hour, so I never had a problem with driving.
Well, I'm not saying we were speeding; we were going 5 miles per hour. But Burning Man is very crowded. It's packed. You've got 70,000 people. It's hard. At my camp of 400 people, which is I know is a 1% size camp. Most camps are not that large, but our camp, it's like we have to. Everything is Tetris, and there's no room. It's like being in a psychedelic refugee camp. We had dignity at Plan B. We had dignity. It was restored. I think we cannot go back to the way things were. Let's talk about. There's a lot of questions in the chat here. Did Decentralized Renegade burn work? Yes, it worked.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And speaking of the other questions, everyone else who has a question currently in the chat, I did invite you on the screen, but everyone so far has either not accepted it or what have you. So if you wanted to come on the screen and it's not working for some reason, say something, or else, I'm just gonna assume you didn't want to actually be on the screen. Other people who want to join, also you can chime in. We can answer these other questions as well, though. But yeah, what did the burn? There's one in the chat there. Did the question of this event title, right? Did the Decentralized Renegade burn work? And yeah, I agree with you, Adam. I think the answer is a resounding yes. It worked.
So Philip Epstein said that they were camera shy and wanted to ask the question: what lessons can BM.org learn from the free burn? And I mean, I can answer something that I would hope that they learned, which is we invited a bunch of folks to the table who had never rangered before, had never done XYZ official job, and being more open to allowing citizens to come and participate in the structure. I would hope that they can trust our citizens enough to make that invitation to the table even cleaner, because I love when volunteers really take on that service heart and help their community and help their regionals, and then hopefully that trickles out into the greater communities. So that would be the lesson I would hope that the org would learn, is how do we democratize that and allow more people to jump in. And I know there's great volunteerism. I'm not saying there isn't. There really is good stuff that people can do.
Yeah. Any other takeaways you guys have for how the org could learn?
I think one really interesting element that we talked about it earlier too is like the programming, right? Usually we arrive, we get this program booklet. We may have already the schedule on Instagram for all the art cars, and then we start running around to go to this event and that event, and none of this actually happened. We may have at some point gotten like a schedule for our favorite art car, but other than that, everything was unorganized. And what happened in the burn night was really that suddenly there were lasers like far away in the distance, and everyone would notice the lasers. Everyone. And they were so huge. And driving to the lasers, there was kind of a light show and things that you could see, especially probably people under the influence of substances would see even more. So it was magical to get there, and the expectations were high. Many people said like, oh, this can only be the lasers of Mayan warriors. So everyone was like, oh, maybe they came for one night. So people who have been there had expectations, and let's say the other people, first timers, just followed and were excited. And once you arrived there was really nothing except of the 3 lasers, and they were huge, and all the art cars and people gathered, but it was just another chaos space where everyone played their music, and it was very sandy at the end, so you had to walk and you couldn't really bike, and the way back was exhausting, and we actually got stuck afterwards. We had to find like a quiet music to calm down, and also didn't see anything else on the playa to follow, because that's what is most fun, right? You see something and then you go after it. So that calming down moment again enabled us a conversation with people we would otherwise never have met, and they also knew each other like from the crypto world, and were meeting up in person for the first time. So during the pandemic they were working together online, but it was the first time they met. And that was only happening because of that. And once we were ready to move on, we stopped by in a bodega, which was right there. And then we finally saw that new art card, the most valuable player with the hexagons. And we said like, okay, this is it. And we went, and I'm pretty sure we saw Daft Punk.
Nice. Kindred spirit. We have someone new enters the ring here. Hello.
Hi. I just wanted to say, love all the energy. It's nice to see people chatting and sharing their experiences. I'm coming to you from Gerlach, Nevada, and I hope that we do get a chance to see everybody come out again next year. And I only wanted to say, I've said a lot of things, but everything feels like it keeps coming back to why not regionals?
Why not regionals? What do you mean by that?
Like the idea that Renegade or Plan B or what have you could exist here, that, or the other, or we can do this without that, the other. And then all the other things that have kind of been said, I feel like they all tie into why not regionals? Why not as close to you as possible? Why not more of your community? Why not?
I mean, we're doing, I think everyone here is doing regionals who's on this call. I mean, we're doing it, but there's nothing like the Black Rock Desert. That's why it is a blank slate, a moonscape. It is a place that also at this point I have 13 years of memories, or 14 years now, 14 years of memories, and it's like going home every time. So it feels like home. It's loved by people from all over the world. It's sorry, Gerlach. No, I think that's why. I mean, I agree with you that maybe there's something to be said for not going every year. Maybe like it's more of a pilgrimage every so often or something. But there is fuel and resources used to go from. I mean, we drove cross country with a trailer. It's from Washington D.C. I mean, the gas bill alone was almost $4,000. So there's a barrier there for people. Not everyone can get there. I think it's why it's so important to do regional burns and make them free. Like Catharsis on the Mall was free all these years. It opened the door to people, all kinds of people, regardless of income.
Yeah, Catharsis. For those who don't know it, it's a pretty awesome event. Thank you, Adam, for I think you were one of the prime movers of getting that sparked. And I just want to shout out Catharsis. It started during when the Drug Policy Alliance had the International Drug Policy Reform Conference in Washington, D.C. And so it was this burn right in front of the Washington Monument and the White House. There was a temple shaped. Basically, inside the temple was a prison, and it was burnt. It was explicitly a vigil for healing the drug war. At least the first year it was. And it was this epic thing. That was in 2015, the first one.
It's a different theme every year, but in this coming year, it's going to be Day of the Dead is the theme.
Oh, wow.
It's going to be like a very Latin issues, like issues facing Latin American countries and the Hispanic community in the United States. So, yeah, but I hear you. More regionals. And yeah, don't just this doesn't just have to happen out in the desert, but boy, is it special when it does. And I had been there for 2 years. I didn't go last year, you know. So it was really special taking a year off and coming back.
Yeah. And we had
maybe
Absolutely, and I think
maybe
people
very
really
quickly.
needed it too.
Can you tell
Sorry.
us, since you're in Gerlach, what's it look like? I mean, is the playa a mess? I mean, how it was? I mean, it didn't look trash when I left, but you know, I didn't leave at the
I've
very
been out
end.
there a couple of times. Went out to check the Porto situation, but was kind of far after they had left. Picked up a bag of trash, I think, on our way out. I know that there was a good cleanup of 50 plus bags of trash on Sunday, like after the event. And it seems maybe if you drive for several miles, you won't see a bunch of trash, but there are, you know, tens of miles to discover. So we'll see once all the blowing of the winds have happened and what the highway looks like in a month, maybe. It's hard to tell. Also, the groups that have been out doing the cleanups, you know, I don't think they're coordinating with each other, so we don't have like a full view of like how many people picked up what that wasn't theirs and took it to where. But yeah, it seems like it's clear out there. The couple of drives I've gone, I'm not seeing a bunch of trash on the ground, not off the side of the highways at all. But yeah, it's a very small area that you see when you drive out. So.
And to flow back to Halcyon, who earlier asked about the importance from online networking and connections, I would really say like Plan B is a Facebook group of 16,000 people by now. There, people were immediately saying, okay, we're still here. I picked up 50 bikes and we brought them to the donation station in Gerlach. And then there was a case about a porta potty, which was actually a really beautiful porta potty from one camp that was left behind with all the shit in there. And people said like, okay, I'm going to put in some money if you give me some hints which camp this was. And other people added to the money. So it ended up being like a few people giving the right hints to like a group that was kind of identified. And then we online, they couldn't talk about the names and asked people to not do so because of liability issues. But the case was handed to the BLM. And it seems like that camp or that group will be fine. So that's kind of another form of showing that self-organization works and that things that are really not tolerated with zero tolerance, and I would speak about the same for zero tolerance for violence or sexual abuse, that these things hopefully are brought to light and handled well within and from the community.
Yeah. Thanks. Good to have you here. I have someone from Gerlach to actually share some perspective there.
Thank you so much.
It's really nice. I think we have Dean. Dean, you were kind of walking around before. And if you're currently somewhere where you're able to come on the screen, happy to have you come on if you can hear me. But yeah, Marisa just, I think we just got that question answered. But I don't know if you wanted to about how the community of Gerlach feels about the Renegade burn. But if you wanted to come back on Kindred Spirit and answer that more than we already did, that's fine too. So we've got here, we'll answer Jenny's question while we're waiting for Dean here. Jenny declined to come on the screen, but Jenny asked, how long did it eventually take to burn the entire temple? I watched for 2 hours, but had to leave the playa that night. Just wondering. Manera, maybe you're best equipped to answer this question.
I know that the fires kind of went all night, and then people were feeding wood into the fire, but it actually didn't take as long as I thought it was going to take, because there's definitely been some forever burns. And like all of a sudden it was done, right? Like, and it was I just remember I was like halfway around the circle checking on the 6 o'clock side. One of the guys from DPW who built this like amazing Anubis head actually broke perimeter with his dog to watch his head burn and take video of it. So I was holding his dog while that was happening.
And everyone started howling, right?
Yeah, and everyone did start howling. The dog started barking and everyone howled in response. It was a really beautiful moment. And he had done that for one of his friends. And then all of a sudden, what Shipwreck had built was gone, and the guys were like, "Oh yeah, that was our last piles of wood, and we're done." And I'm like, "Oh, whoa, that's that was so much easier than I thought it was going to be. So it went pretty fast. We didn't allow for non-burnables to burn, right? So we only allowed for wood for very safety reasons and to comply with BLM. So we allowed that. And then Casey and Rainbow Lightning took responsibility for that centerpiece, and that also didn't take that long to take apart. So yeah, it was pretty cool. And we dropped perimeter pretty quickly too. So that was a beautiful thing, was because we dropped perimeter, and then there were all these cauldrons. There were 10 cauldrons that Rainbow Lightning had built that people can gather around. There were all of these little moments of, people singing around the fire or talking about their loved ones. And so just depending on which fire you ended up on, and you can walk between them, you can have these different experiences. So like that part was really, really special.
Yeah, there were some different things happening each one. There was the singing on the one, and there's more silence on another. That was really interesting. There were micro temple burns, like people doing it their own way, which was really interesting. Because normally, like the temple burn is a more centralized experience, and there are different ways people were processing that moment or working with it or whatever. And maybe people are doing things different than just grief. Normally, it's really specifically grief, and of course, that was a big theme there. But it seemed like there were other energies being expressed in that temple this year as well, in addition to grief, which is really interesting to see too. Yeah. So we have Dean. If you are there, we'll bring you on the screen. In the meanwhile, I'm gonna. Let's see if Annie wants to come on here. Inviting Annie onto the screen. And while we're waiting for Annie to come on the screen here, we're kind of, and we're by the way, we're coming to the last question I think we'll take, because we're about in the last kind of 10 minutes. The great Annie Oak is here. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for hosting this. This has been great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the stage is yours right now.
So my question was, I saw that there were volunteer medical services there on the playa, and I was really grateful that they were there. Does anyone know who provided those services? And could we thank them publicly for doing that?
I thanked them there. I don't know. I didn't get their off playa information. I did thank them. So
my understanding, now this was playa rumor. My understanding was there was some sort of discussion between Borg and Brock Pierce. I know that Kevin, Annie knows Kevin, one of Sean's friends. Kevin was approached about our project bringing on medical as well. So I know the org was concerned about medical because they wanted to be responsible. So I believe that you paid for it, and I believe that they were called Loco Ocho. But I definitely know that Plan B has at least a few posts related to them. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting us know. I heard from some of the people at Ranger Camp that there were, as far as they knew, very few serious injuries. And as far as they knew, as of Sunday, nobody was medevaced out, which was great to hear. And my feeling was that people were taking extra care and looking out for each other. And that was really good to see. I was really happy to see that, and also happy to see people driving around with more care, more slowly, and being careful in their vehicles. Yeah.
Well, the temple crew was very trained by you, Annie. So we were very, we came together for Sean. So
it's a beautiful thing to see. It was my 25th burn, and I was really grateful to be there and grateful for everyone's care and consideration for each other.
Yeah, it was really nice for me to see, without a central organization. Hey, there were medical people that came to help, and that was just, I remember when I saw that, I was like, that was really.
And I don't know about you guys, but our camp, we had a few people in our RVs, again, because of obviously any training. This is where Narcan is, right? Like, so there was definitely a lot of conversations internally to camp of like, this is where a first aid bag is. This is where, so I'm assuming a lot of other camps behave that way. Kelsey did, Rainbow Lightning did. So, and James disconnected. So, and I'm guessing you, Adam, also among your guys' camp. I know Roberta also did. So.
Yeah. I was there with our build camp, Dust Hazard, and we had our medical bags out there as well. We're the build camp for the Full Circle Tea House and Camp Soft Landing, and it was wonderful to see our build camp in action. We've gone to playa for many years as a camp and trained there to be radically self-sufficient, and that really paid off as well. So props to all the playa participants who have been out there with us all those years as well. That's also been a magical event.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to add one more preparation point, because I think in all of our documents that we had, Google Drive, whatever it was, we added, of course, the first aid kit, but I also made sure that all the groups of my friends that I had access to, that I knew who were going, had Narcan in their camps. We are in America. We have currently a very unstable drug supply, and the pandemic has also impacted the drug supply even more. Again, most people are, let's say, privileged enough and have more have enough money to actually access good quality drugs, at least the people who attended. But for the case that there would have been an overdose or someone using from a new batch, we also would always make sure that they report if they start using from a new batch that they haven't used before or have sourced it on playa. Again, I personally didn't see any sales, so people who were using drugs were also self-reliant and brought what they were supposed to bring and actually cared for their community as well. But I really think, like, as long as we don't have a safe drug supply, or at least more opportunities for drug checking at festivals and beforehand, we really need to also make people aware that everyone should carry Narcan.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Thanks for the reminders about the risk reduction. And I'm sure, Annie, you agree with that one too. You're now unmuted. Go ahead.
Just shout out to DanceSafe for providing drug testing and drug checking services at events. They do a lot of great work, and really grateful to that organization. If you want to make a nonprofit donation towards really great drug checking services at events, give them some money. They do great work, and their efforts are replicated by others. I brought Narcan out there. We've done naloxone Narcan trainings out on the playa in the past, and it's a good thing to carry and distribute and train other people how to use, and encourage people not to use alone, especially if they're doing opioids.
Yeah. Dance safe. I'll echo that shout out too. We got time for Dean. You're the last question up, and I'm going to put you on mute just because a little bit of background noise, but you are welcome to stay here with us. Dean, you get the last question of the event, so you're up. And we met on the playa this year also, and I guess that's how you ended up here on this event. Is because we ran into each other on the playa.
Precisely, that is exactly how I ended up here. It was a very awesome example of how, kind of the thing you talked about earlier, Mike, about how you turned your bike around in a completely different direction, and the magic just happened on its own.
Literally did it that night.
yeah, literally, it works. We can get into synchronicity and Jung and physics and all that, but we won't do that. So the thing that I've been thinking about a lot is how often in the psychedelic community we separate the terms set and setting from each other. The mindset and the environment in which it's embedded. And to me, when we're talking about decentralization, there's kind of two different ways of collective organization. And I feel like the common way that we're used to in normal capitalistic societies is that of competition, that of organizing from a kind of management perspective instead of as much of a leadership perspective. And I think one thing that Burning Man does really well is it gives everyone the position to be in that position of leadership in a way that allows them to excel at what they're best at. So they're not just kind of thrown into some arbitrary role that they need to take on because that's just like the role that's available at some job or organization or whatever. But someone can, like, for example, if they want test out a business for an international, community of people that they could maybe make happen in the default world in a way that's easier than it would be if you were to test it out in like a regular city, say like one of those bigger ones that are booming. Like I'm in Denver, there's Austin, Seattle, Portland, Bay Area, you name it. So the thing I really think about is, and people talk about this all the time, how do we bring the Burning Man spirit back to society? But like on a very, both like on a practical and philosophical level, I'm curious because we're all kind of living in different cities. Like what spaces have shown up where you guys are located, or what sort of infrastructure, what models of community organization have shown up wherever you guys are at in your, whether you're, I'm assuming you guys are in cities, maybe some of you are not. But like, because I'll give you some examples in Denver. There's a community called Archipelago that's a membership-based holistic wellness community. There's a Kabbalah-based community called Sacred Tribe that has a religious exemption to host psilocybin ceremonies. There's various community examples here that kind of like practically carry on this spirit of interconnected creativity. There's this one philosopher who I really like, who she said something that I loved, that the only type of communism she can ever picture working is the family. And what she meant by that is that like it's hard in the settings we're used to, like the environments we're used to, especially in cities, to organize in any way that's relatively remotely close to anything that happens at Burning Man. So talking about like, does it work or not? I think like at something like Burning Man, it works because people are in this context that allows them to be themselves. But like, it's kind of, so I guess for me, in order for that to continuously work, we need to be able to integrate it back where we live. And that needs to be a kind of reciprocal thing, such that these two kind of situations kind of collapse into each other. So it's not this like whole, we work during the week, we have our versions of Burning Man on the weekends sort of scenario. So what I want to throw back at you guys is like, what have you noticed in your everyday lives, in your cities, that works in terms of community organization, either really practical examples of organizations that are doing Burning Man-esque things, models of community organization that have worked, and that have worked quasi-permanently, not just in the temporary context. So so the type of thing I've been thinking about is, how do we create settings such that it creates sets that allow us to be ourselves? That's what I'll throw back to you guys.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of examples I can think of, right? Co-ops are kind of like, there's a lot more co-op type organizations and different types of organization structures that are emerging. But I have an example here, though. Here in the Bay Area, we have a new physical psychedelic community center called Portal. And we just kind of opened the doors a couple months ago. And big thanks to Dr. Bronner's. They are sponsoring it. They paid the rent for 3 years, and we have a community space that's free to use. And it is the way it's being organized. So we have an advisory council. I'm one of the members, and there are other folks that are doing psychedelic education, community work in the local area are part of that advisory council. And so we are and we're figuring it out. It's all brand new. So we're actually figuring out the governance. We're figuring out what the rules are. We're figuring out how to do it. And we have a meeting in a couple of days, and we're going to discuss some of the emergent questions around like policies for the community center. But that's one example. And folks who are in the Bay Area, we haven't built a website yet, but we do have a calendar that's live. You go to portalcommunity.org, you can see the Google Calendar for all of the events that are coming up. And yeah, there's an example there of it is, there's a center, so it's centralized, and there is a community center, but the organization of it there is a whole council that's trying to collectively make the decisions for policies and whatnot. So it's an interesting emerging experiment that we're doing right here now that's coming up in my mind, right as you asked that question.
I can maybe add to that because I'm also still in the Bay Area before leaving in October. And I would say there are kind of two different parts when we look at the bigger problems and the evolving psychedelic science and retreat space. I would say around psychedelics, a lot has been moving, especially in the Bay Area or in California more broadly, because we had SB 519, which was a bill to decriminalize certain hallucinogenic substances that passed the whole Senate pretty easily and then kind of got stopped in the Assembly. So it's on pause right now and will only be discussed next year. But that gave like a lot of momentum and it went really fast. And organizations like Fireside Project started off as a nonprofit. It's the first peer support hotline where people can call if they have a challenging experience with psychedelics while under the influence, or they can call afterwards for integration. So things like that have happened. We have obviously legal ketamine assisted therapy, both at Kaiser in more private settings in Oakland, in Berkeley, mostly in the East Bay. And there is also Sage Institute that I want to highlight because they're working with like different access scale models also for non-binary people and Black people and so on. So there are a lot of groups and also Psychedelic Society of San Francisco organizing around that. And at the other side, like the huge problem really is both here in San Francisco and the East Bay, the homelessness, right? And for that issue, we have smaller projects such as, for example, Safe Organized Spaces that definitely have like that Burning Man spirit of providing small houses for the community members and basically building them together with them. And some of these projects were also featured during the pandemic in a Zoom meeting organized by Burners Without Borders. And they had a really great format where people could just jump on and like promote or talk about their project related to social issues or sustainability. So I would also recommend you look up the meeting notes or reach out to me. I can share them with you because there were some really good projects, community-based, that kind of arose out of the pandemic, but also with a burner spirit.
I'm thinking of more from when you're speaking there. You mentioned psychedelic societies, and I've been personally involved in getting a number of these types of groups started around the country, around the world, and many of them are set up in decentralized ways. Some of them aren't. Some of them have executive directors, but some of them are set up as co-ops. And I've also created these networks for them to connect with each other that are designed as decentralized networks. So each psychedelic society, there isn't like an umbrella organization that they all have to there is this global psychedelic society network, right? But it is decentralized. It is for horizontal information and resource exchange. So that's another example I could think of. And then of course, as people might know, an event that I threw a few years ago with some other folks, the Crypto Psychedelic Summit. And we had a flashback series earlier this year. So the crypto world, right, is a example of people embodying decentralization principles. My hat says decentralized. It's from the Decentralized Dance Party that Gary LaChance runs, which is awesome. Who I met at Crypto Psychedelic in Tulum back in 2018. But yeah, there's and I'll just say, folks who want that, on the PsychSems website, you go to psychsems.com/crypto psychedelic. The full series is there if you're interested in crypto and decentralization. Many more rabbit holes to go down. I'll throw a link in the chat. But just as recently as last night, we're starting a project. I talked about it a little bit on this year's Crypto Psychedelic Flashback series, but an actual psychedelic idea for a psychedelic community currency that I've been ideating on, called the Peach Token, but had a gathering last night at Portal, brought some folks together to start collectively envisioning what is this, what would it look like, and starting it small and local. But this is an emerging project. I'll throw some links out there to all this stuff though. But those are some more examples coming to mind as we're sitting here.
And those guys, the crypto crew, financed a good chunk of this work, right? So in this very decentralized way. So that part was really interesting too, because all of a sudden we found ourselves with resources. So I think that's why it was such an interesting cauldron of like possibility and evidence.
Yeah. Yeah, we are getting to our time, but I just want to give a chance. Why don't we go around the horn here, and if there's any final thoughts before we close out? Everything is impermanent, even fishbowl crowdcast events. So why don't we go around here? If anyone had any final thoughts you wanted to share before we close this one out?
No, I would say that over the years, Burning Man has been our school, our classroom of sorts. We've learned. I know I can speak for myself and other people that I produce events with. We've learned a lot about infrastructure, about taking care of each other, about being self-reliant, about how to lead teams, how to build in bad weather, how to finance our own camps. And I think that we're taking those lessons and that knowledge with us wherever we go into our own projects. And that, for me, is the true art of Burning Man. Has less to do with the organization itself and more to do with what we learn out there and what we do with that knowledge back in the world to serve ourselves, create art, and serve our communities.
Yeah, to dovetail off of Annie, I don't know if you know this, but I'm moving in with Miley, Annie. So to Denver, so I mean to the Colorado area. So absolutely, we're taking what we have loved and what we've learned as a group of folks to a whole new area ahead of the 2023 Denver Psychedelic Conference that MAPS is doing. So, like that's part of the long-term goal is initiations around that, right? So we obviously want to be involved in our communities.
It's good we have some tricksters laying the groundwork before the conference comes to Denver.
Well, I just want to say I really appreciate that we had this conversation tonight, and this sort of it's helping me decompress for sure from Plan B, and I hope we really do enshrine more sort of free burn concepts into the future of Burning Man. I do care about Burning Man a lot, and I'm not one of these folks who just wants it to go away. I actually think it needs to change and evolve and learn from what just happened, and try to capture some of the unique elements of it. And because I think sitting in a 6-hour line and or perhaps it'll only be 2 hours if you're lucky, but I think those days have to change. We have to change this, and plus I think people will treat the event with more care if it's not seen as you're paying to be entertained. And I think it's gotten to that point. Unfortunately, it's changed a lot just in the time I've been participating, and I'm sure people who were participating in the 90s compared to 2019, 2018 have seen a radical difference, a different event. And do we just go back to 2019? Are we just going to go back to the way things were before COVID? I mean, there is a strong case being made for opening up the entire playa for a decentralized event that still has Burning Man at the heart of it, and Burning Man could still be providing much of the infrastructure, and it's all about negotiating with the government the right permit. And I don't know, maybe we're running out of time, so we can't get into all of it, but I do think there's got to be a way to merge these two type of events into one, and allow people to have a lot more exploration out there. So people are more careful when they don't have the guardrails. So, oh, and speaking about mutant vehicles, we didn't really talk about them very much, but I didn't get pulled over driving with people unseatbelted. I had 80 people or so on this bus with multiple stories, a roof and a lower level, and it's the Abraxas Dragon bus, but it was set up as a freaker bird, and I was waving at the BLM, and they waved back, and everybody was in a good mood. And so if there were tickets being handed out, I just didn't see that happening. Although I do have one friend who took his Suburban to new levels where he attached a mattress to the back of the Suburban and was giving mattress rides, dragging this mattress around. I tried it. It was actually really a lot of fun, and he was going very slow, but it's a very dusty experience. And they told him that his mattress he was doing it all right. The BLM pulled him over. They said, you're doing everything right, except you need guardrails on the mattress. And he later actually fashioned up a stick with rope, like little guardrails on this mattress, and continued to do it. So, but that's the kind of thing you wouldn't see at Burning Man. You just wouldn't have someone driving around with a Suburban with a mattress tied to the back, dragging it around. And, everyone would be on your case about it. And at this event, it was like, wow, that's really creative. And you wouldn't, so that's the kind of thing I'm saying. People were able to experiment, in ways you couldn't in the past. And yes, with more people, there was commentary earlier. We would never be able to do this like this again if it's a lot more people, but we could still learn some things from it. Some of the comments are great about, an over-engineered event. How do you un-engineer it? It felt like it got completely re-engineered for just this week. So thanks for having me on again. Thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, actually, shout out to you, Adam. This is all your fault that it's happening. It was your idea.
I was like, do something.
Yeah, so we had a quick story, one Burning Man story. I ended up on Burn Night on Abraxas, on the dragon, whatever it was, the turkey or peacock, whatever it was this year.
Speaker bird.
Certainly.
We ran into you there, and then you were like, "Hey, so this thing, like, we should do it. We should talk about this burn." And I was like, that's a great idea. And so I was inspired. I hadn't done it actually, and I got a little bit burned out from online events, and I hadn't been inspired in a while. And so thanks for getting me inspired again and making this event happen.
Yeah, and maybe to conclude, I also want to really send out my thanks again to all the people that I met on playa, including my friends, and we met over and over again. Mike, you said it before, serendipity. This was really the year for it, and everyone was exactly where they were meant to be. Everyone showed up, and also thanks to the rangers and the police. I think the ones we talked to, the officers, were really nice. They were understanding, and they also, maybe across the years and elsewhere, learned about the culture and really respected that we came out and organized this one. And overall, I think, like Annie said, it's so many lessons learned. It's like everything you can imagine, you can achieve it, and we can best achieve it if we work together collectively and if we share about our ideas, our dreams, and whatever it takes. And in my case, I'm a researcher, I'm a scientist, right? So while at Burning Man, I was still a postdoc at UCSF, and right the week after, I had my final day after 3.5 years. And so for me, life is moving on, and I decided to take time off to travel. So going to South America and learn more about plant medicine from the indigenous people and the wisdom that is not just in the books and in our papers. So Burning Man each year teaches us there is so much more than we can even imagine. So that's why we should keep going out, exploring nature, being in community with each other, and really, really gift each other presents, not just material things, but be in interaction and create these safe spaces for exploration and interaction wherever we go.
Yeah. All right. Amen to everything. Thank you all. Couple quick notes. The conversation actually can continue. We have a Discord server for PsychSims. I put the link in the chat there. So we have a whole online community that's continuous, asynchronous. So click the link if you want to join the chat. And if you appreciated this, you want to see more of this, we've got a Patreon. So if you feel inspired, go to Patreon, support it from $2 to $100 a month, whatever you like. And what I'll say, on Friday night of the burn, there was a ritual for Sean, who we've mentioned here, and a new word was created that night. You all know Namaste is, the God in me acknowledges the God in you. And, now that our friend Sean is gone, there's pieces of him that we all see in each other, right? So the term Shamaste, the Sean in me acknowledges the Sean in you. And I think we all have that person. We probably have someone we remember who was inspiring in some way, and we see aspects of them in each other. And so I'll just put that out there for whoever it is for you. Let's, those who have passed are now decentralized, right? So, we'll end on a note of gratitude for those who have passed, and we will take in their spirits decentralized. Shamaste. And take care, all.